When the clock struck 1 in the morning, Serafina Louisa Harrington, the ice-cold CEO of Harrington Dynamics, stumbled into the marble lobby, pretending to be so intoxicated she could barely walk straight. Silas Archie Beaumont, the single father working night security, thought she was just another wealthy executive causing trouble. But when he steadied her, he noticed something very unusual. Her breath carried no trace of alcohol. And as Serafina trembled against him, Silas realized the truth. She wasn't drunk, she was running from someone. But what was Serafina really running from? And why would a powerful CEO fake drunkenness in front of a minimum wage security guard? The answer would flip everything upside down. Serafina Louisa Harrington was 34 years old, with platinum blonde hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders and features so sharp they could cut glass. She led Harrington Dynamics, a technology conglomerate worth billions, with the kind of precision that made competitors nervous and investors confident. Her office occupied the top floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Chicago, and her signature was worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. She wore tailored suits in shades of gray and black, never smiled during meetings, and had a reputation for ending partnerships with a single glance. But for the past month, something had changed. Serafina stayed late at the office almost every night, long after her executive team had gone home. The light in her corner office burned until 2 or 3 in the morning, and the few people who passed by noticed her standing at the window, staring down at the street below with an expression that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or product launches. Her assistant mentioned that she seemed distracted, jumping at unexpected sounds, checking her phone constantly as if waiting for a message she both dreaded and anticipated. There was a shadow in her past, something she refused to discuss, something that made her check the rearview mirror 5 times on her way home and double lock every door behind her. Whatever it was getting closer. Silas Archie Beaumont was 36 years old, tall and solidly built, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and eyes that seemed to notice everything without trying. He moved with the careful economy of someone who had learned long ago not to waste energy on unnecessary motion. He wore the standard security uniform, dark blue shirt, black pants, a radio clipped to his belt, and carried himself with a quiet dignity that made people instinctively trust him. Before taking the night shift at Harrington Dynamics, Silas had served 8 years with a rapid response unit, the kind that got called when situations went from bad to worse in the span of a heartbeat. He had saved lives, lost teammates, and learned to read danger in the set of someone's shoulders or the rhythm of their breathing. Then his wife died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and Silas walked away from that life to raise their son alone. Finn Oliver Beaumont was 7 years old, with his mother's smile and his father's steady gaze. Every evening before leaving for his shift, Silas made dinner, helped with homework, and tucked Finn into bed with a promise to be home by morning. Then he drove to the tower, clocked in, and spent the night walking the empty corridors of a building where people measured success in stock prices and mergers. Silas thought Serafina Harrington was exactly what she appeared to be, a wealthy, privileged executive who had never known real hardship. He had seen her exactly 3 times in the 6 months he had worked there. Once stepping out of a black sedan, once crossing the lobby on her phone, and once standing at the elevator with an expression so cold it could freeze water. She had never looked at him directly, never acknowledged his existence beyond the most basic nod of recognition that she gave to furniture and fixtures. And Serafina, for her part, had categorized Silas as simply part of the building's infrastructure, reliable, unremarkable, and utterly beneath her concern. She had more important things to worry about. But Silas noticed things. He noticed that Serafina checked the parking garage before walking to her car. He noticed the way her gaze darted to the corners of the lobby before crossing to the elevator. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped her phone like a lifeline, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was watching. Something was wrong, and whatever it was, she was carrying it alone. The trouble started 3 weeks earlier, though Serafina told no one about it. She began receiving emails from an anonymous account messages with no subject line, just a single sentence. You can't run from the truth forever. Then came the photographs slipped under her office door. Pictures of her leaving the building. Pictures of her car in the garage. Pictures of her apartment building at night with her bedroom window circled in red marker. The red envelopes appeared next, placed on her desk when she stepped out of the office for meetings. Inside, each one was a single sheet of paper with a date and time written in block letters. No signature, no explanation, just the growing certainty that someone was watching her every move. Someone who knew her schedule better than she did. Serafina considered going to the police. She drafted emails to the detective division, started phone calls she never finished, pulled up the website for the FBI cybercrime unit, and then closed the tab. Because reporting it meant explaining things she had spent years trying to forget, meant dragging out secrets that should have stayed buried, meant admitting she had made mistakes that could destroy everything she had built. So she stayed silent and tried to be careful. But being careful was not enough. Silas first noticed the black Dodge Charger on a Monday night. It was parked across the street from the tower entrance, engine running, headlights off. The same car appeared on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, always in a different spot, but always with a clear view of the main doors. Silas wrote down the license plate and ran it through the database. The registration came back to a rental company with no name attached. He mentioned it to Serafina one evening as she crossed the lobby. "Ma'am, there's been a vehicle watching the building. If you're concerned about security," she cut him off without breaking stride. "I'm sure you're imagining things." Her voice was ice, her expression blank. "Focus on your actual job." But Silas knew what he had seen, and he knew from the way her jaw tightened and her pace quickened that she knew too. That was when Serafina started pretending to be drunk. It was a desperate plan, born of desperation and terror. If whoever was following her thought she was just another careless executive stumbling home after too many cocktails, maybe they would lose interest. Maybe they would look elsewhere for whatever they wanted from her. Maybe they would leave her alone. So she practiced in her office, loosening her posture, letting her gait become unsteady, affecting the slightly unfocused gaze of someone who had spent too long at the bar. Then, when the clock struck 1 in the morning and the building was nearly empty, she put on her performance and made her way to the lobby. The first time it happened, Silas was checking the security monitors when he heard the elevator chime. He looked up to see Serafina stumbling across the marble floor, one hand trailing along the wall for balance, her usually perfect posture gone loose and careless. His first thought was annoyance, another rich person who could not handle their liquor, but then his training kicked in. He crossed the lobby in 6 quick strides and caught her elbow as she wavered. "Miss Harrington, are you all right?" "Fine," she slurred, leaning heavily against him. "Just tired." But something was wrong. Silas had been around enough intoxicated people to know what alcohol smelled like: the sweet sour tang of wine, the burn of whiskey, the hoppy heaviness of beer. Serafina's breath carried none of those scents, just mint toothpaste and fear. He looked down at her wrist where it gripped his arm and saw the purple-green shadow of a bruise, the kind that came from someone grabbing too hard. Her pulse was racing beneath his fingers, and her eyes, when they met his for just a fraction of a second, were completely clear and terrified. "Who hurt you?" Silas asked quietly, his voice barely audible in the empty lobby. Serafina pulled away, suddenly steadier on her feet. "No one. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." Then she was gone, clicking across the floor in heels that did not stumble once, pushing through the revolving door into the night. Silas stood in the lobby for a long moment, thinking. Then he pulled up the security footage and watched the parking garage cameras. He saw Serafina's car pull out at 1:15 in the morning. He saw the black Dodge Charger pull out 30 seconds later and follow her into the street. After that, Silas watched more carefully. The danger escalated on a Thursday night when everything went dark. Serafina had stayed late again, working through reports she could barely focus on, checking the time every few minutes and dreading the walk to her car. At 1:30 in the morning, she finally gathered her briefcase, locked her office, and took the elevator down to the parking garage. The overhead lights were supposed to stay on all night. Building policy. Safety requirement. But when the elevator doors opened, Serafina stepped out into complete darkness. She froze, her hand still on the elevator button, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The garage was enormous, 3 underground levels filled with concrete pillars and painted lines, and the echoing emptiness of a space designed for hundreds of cars. Right now, at this hour, there were maybe a dozen vehicles scattered across the expanse, hers parked in her reserved spot near the far wall. Serafina pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The small beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow path forward, but making the shadows deeper everywhere else. She started walking, trying to keep her breathing steady, telling herself that circuit breakers failed all the time, that this was just bad luck, that there was no reason to panic. Then she saw the man standing beside her car. He was tall, wearing dark clothes that blended into the shadows, and he was not moving. Just standing there, one hand resting on the hood of her vehicle, waiting. Serafina spun around and ran. She made it maybe 20 feet before Silas appeared in front of her. He must have been checking the cameras, must have seen the lights go out, must have known something was wrong. He caught her shoulders as she nearly collided with him, steadying her, his eyes scanning the darkness behind her. "Inside," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Now, he guided her back to the elevator, pressed the button for the main floor, and positioned himself between Serafina and the garage. She was shaking so badly she could hardly stand. Her carefully constructed composure shattered completely. The elevator doors closed, and they rose in silence. In the security office, Silas pulled up the garage footage from 5 minutes earlier. The cameras showed a figure entering through the stairwell, access the door that was supposed to be locked, moving between the cars, locating Serafina's vehicle, and waiting. The camera angle was wrong to catch a clear view of the face, but the body language was familiar. Patient, determined, dangerous. "I'm calling the police," Silas said, reaching for the phone. "No." Serafina's voice was sharp, cutting through the small office like a blade. "Someone is stalking you." "I know." "Then let me help." She looked at him then, really looked at him. And Silas saw the calculation in her eyes, weighing risk against risk, fear against shame, pride against survival. Then something in her expression cracked, just slightly, and she shook her head. "You don't understand what you're asking. Try me." But she would not. She thanked him for his help, straightened her jacket, and left through the front entrance. Silas watched her go and knew with absolute certainty that this was far from over. The internal struggle was tearing both of them apart in different ways. Serafina spent her days running a billion-dollar company with ruthless efficiency, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, presenting quarterly results to rooms full of shareholders who expected nothing but perfection. Then she spent her nights looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, wondering how long she could maintain the facade before everything came crashing down. She wanted to tell someone the truth. She wanted to walk into the security office and explain everything, the history, the betrayal, the evidence hidden in her office safe, the reason someone wanted her dead. But telling meant risking more than her own safety. It meant dragging Silas into something dangerous, something that could cost him everything. And Serafina had already cost too many people too much. There was guilt there too, heavy and suffocating. Because she had created this situation, she had trusted the wrong person, ignored the warning signs, let ambition blind her to the dangers that were building in the shadows of her own company. Now she was paying the price, and the idea of spreading that cost to an innocent security guard who had done nothing but try to help made her want to scream. The past and present were tangled together in her mind, bleeding into each other until she could not separate what had happened from what was happening now. Every footstep in the hallway sounded like the footsteps from before. Every phone call echoed with voices she thought she had escaped. Every email could be the one that destroyed everything. Silas had his own war to fight. Every instinct from his years in rapid response was screaming that Seraphina Harrington was in real danger, that someone was hunting her, that the situation would escalate until someone got hurt or killed. He had seen this pattern before: the stalking, the escalation, the moment when watching turned into acting. Waiting never helped. Hesitation cost lives. But he had Finn waiting at home, his 7-year-old son who had already lost his mother, who deserved a father who came home safe every morning, who needed stability and security more than he needed a parent who played hero. Silas had walked away from his old life specifically to give Finn a normal childhood. And getting involved in whatever darkness was chasing Seraphina Harrington was the opposite of normal. He lay awake during the day, trying to sleep before his next shift. But his mind would not quiet. Professional responsibility or personal obligation. Protect the building or protect the person. Do his job or do what was right. The questions cycled endlessly, and no answer felt complete. But in the end, there was no real choice, because Silas knew what happened when good people stood by and did nothing. He had seen the aftermath too many times, zipped too many body bags, delivered too many terrible notifications to families who would never be whole again. And he had made a promise to himself, after the worst of those days, that he would never look away from someone who needed help, even if it meant everything. The storm came on a Friday night. The weather service had been warning about it for days, a massive system moving in from the west, bringing high winds and torrential rain, and the kind of lightning that knocked out power across entire neighborhoods. By midnight, the storm had arrived in full force, turning the streets into rivers and the sky into a wall of black fury. Seraphina stayed in her office until 1 in the morning, watching the rain streak down the windows and trying to convince herself that whoever was following her would not be out in this weather. But when she finally gathered her things and headed for the elevator, she knew better. He would be there. He was always there. She put on her drunk act again, stumbling through the lobby with exaggerated unsteadiness, hoping it would be enough. Silas watched her go, his jaw tight with frustration, and then he saw what she did not. The man was standing just outside the revolving door, partially hidden by the overhang, but clearly visible on the security camera. Tall, wearing a dark rain jacket, hood pulled up against the storm. Waiting. Silas did not think. He moved. He was out the door before Seraphina had made it 3 steps into the rain. He caught her arm and pulled her back toward the building, but the man was already moving forward, cutting off their retreat. Silas made a split-second decision and ran, dragging Seraphina with him, heading not back inside but around the side of the building where the loading docks and storage areas created a maze of concrete and steel. They ran through the storm, rain hammering down so hard it felt like fists, lightning illuminating the world in brief white flashes that turned everything into a nightmare landscape of sharp angles and deep shadows. Seraphina kicked off her heels and ran barefoot, her breath coming in gasps, her carefully styled hair plastered to her face. Behind them, she could hear the man following, his footsteps steady and relentless. Silas found an open door to a storage warehouse and pulled them inside. The space was cavernous and dark, filled with shelving units stacked high with equipment and supplies. He pulled Seraphina behind a row of metal shelves and pressed a finger to his lips, listening. Footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Slow, methodical, searching. Serafina was shaking uncontrollably, her whole body racked with tremors that had nothing to do with the cold rain. She pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sound of her breathing, but small, broken sounds escaped anyway. Silas put an arm around her shoulders, trying to offer what comfort he could, and waited. When the footsteps finally faded and the warehouse fell silent again, Serafina broke completely. She turned her face into Silas's shoulder and cried not the delicate tears of someone unused to emotion, but the raw, desperate sobs of someone who had been holding on too tightly for too long. Her whole frame shook with it, and when she finally found words, they came out in a whisper that barely qualified as sound. "He's going to kill me. If I tell anyone the truth, he's going to kill me." Silas held her until the worst of it passed, until her breathing steadied and the tears slowed. Then he said, very quietly, "Tell me anyway." So she did. His name was Dante Crispin Hale, and he had been Serafina's executive assistant for 3 years. Brilliant, charming, efficient beyond measure. He had been the person she trusted most in the entire company. He managed her schedule, handled sensitive communications, attended meetings when she could not, and had access to nearly everything that made Harrington Dynamics function. What Serafina did not know, what no one knew, was that Dante had been using that access to embezzle millions of dollars from the Research and Development Fund. He created ghost projects, funneled money into offshore accounts, falsified reports, and covered his tracks with the skill of someone who had planned this for years. It was a perfect crime, invisible in the complexity of corporate accounting, and it would have continued indefinitely if Serafina had not accidentally discovered a discrepancy in one of the quarterly reports. She found the evidence by accident while reviewing budget projections late one night. A single line item that did not match. A project code that did not exist in the system. A payment to a vendor she had never heard of. She started digging deeper and discovered the whole ugly truth: millions stolen, documentation forged, research projects that existed only on paper. And all of it led back to Dante. She confronted him in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. Told him she had the evidence. Told him she was going to the authorities. Told him it was over. That was when he threatened her. Dante knew people, he explained calmly, his voice never rising above a pleasant conversational tone. He knew people in law enforcement who could make evidence disappear. He knew people in the criminal world who could make other things disappear. If Serafina reported him, if she tried to destroy his life, then he would destroy hers first. And if she pushed too hard, if she became too much of a problem, then he would solve the problem permanently. She did not believe him at first. But then the emails started, then the photographs, then the red envelopes, then the black Dodge Charger following her home, and Serafina realized that Dante Crispin Hale meant every word he had said. "I have all the evidence locked in my office safe," Serafina said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Bank records, forged documents, email trails, everything. But I can't go to the police because Dante has connections inside the department. He'll know before I finish giving my statement, and then I'm dead." Silas listened to all of it without interrupting, his expression unreadable in the darkness of the warehouse. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said the words that made her go completely still. "You're not alone in this anymore." The next morning, Serafina did not come to work. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her assistant grew concerned by noon and called building security. By 2 in the afternoon, Silas was standing in the parking garage, staring at Serafina's car still in its reserved spot, and feeling ice spread through his chest. Her phone was on the ground next to the driver's side door. The screen was cracked, as if it had been dropped or thrown. The security cameras showed Serafina arriving at her usual time that morning, walking toward her vehicle, and then a white van pulling up beside her. Two figures emerging. A brief struggle, Serafina being forced into the van. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Silas did not wait for the police. He did not call his supervisor or file a report or follow any kind of protocol. He pulled up the license plate from the van, ran it through every database he had access to, and traced it to a rental company. Then he called an old contact from his rapid response days, a federal agent named Marcus Chen, who owed him a favor and got the renter's information. Dante Crispin Hale had rented the van under a false name, but the credit card trail led back to one of his shell companies. Marcus pulled Dante's phone records and found a location that pinged repeatedly over the past week, an abandoned warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city. Silas drove there with Marcus and two other agents following in an unmarked car. The warehouse was massive, set back from the road, surrounded by empty lots and rusting machinery. No one had worked there in years, and it was exactly the kind of place someone chose when they wanted to be left alone. The confrontation happened in the warehouse's main floor, a vast open space with concrete walls and broken windows that let in gray afternoon light. Dante had Serafina tied to a metal chair in the center of the room, her wrists bound with zip ties, her face bruised. He was pacing in front of her, talking in that same calm, pleasant voice Serafina remembered from their years working together. "You ruined everything," Dante was saying. 3 years of perfect planning, 3 years of careful work, and you ruined it because you couldn't leave well enough alone. So now I have to ruin you. That was when Silas stepped out of the shadows. Dante spun around, surprise flickering across his face for just a moment before he recovered his composure. He looked Silas up and down, taking in the security uniform, and then he smiled. The night guard. "How noble. Did you come to save the damsel in distress? Let her go," Silas said simply. "Or what? You'll arrest me? You're a security guard, not a cop." Dante pulled a knife from his pocket, casual, like he was showing off a new pen. "Besides, by the time anyone finds her, I'll be in a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty. You're not leaving this building." Dante lunged. He was fast, trained, dangerous in a way that corporate criminals usually were not. But Silas was faster. Years of training, years of real-world experience, years of surviving situations that would have killed most people. All of it came back in an instant. He sidestepped the knife, caught Dante's wrist, twisted until bones cracked, and took him down to the concrete floor in 3 efficient moves. It was not much of a fight. Dante struggled, but Silas had been trained to control people twice his size in situations far more chaotic than this. Within seconds, Dante was face down on the floor with his arms pinned behind his back, and the federal agents were swarming into the warehouse with weapons drawn. Silas left Dante to Marcus and went directly to Serafina. He cut the zip ties with the knife Dante had dropped, helped her stand, caught her when her legs gave out from hours of being bound. She looked up at him with eyes that were hollow with exhaustion and terror and relief all mixed together. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she said it again, louder, like she needed to hear the words to believe them. "Thank you." The aftermath came quickly and without mercy. Dante Crispin Hale was charged with embezzlement, kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. The evidence from Serafina's safe, combined with the kidnapping itself, made the case against him airtight. He would spend decades in prison, possibly the rest of his life, and any connections he might have had in law enforcement evaporated when the federal government got involved. Serafina held a press conference 2 days later, standing in the Harrington Dynamics lobby with Silas beside her. She explained everything: the embezzlement, the threats, the stalking, the kidnapping. She thanked Silas publicly, in front of the entire company and a dozen news cameras, for saving her life and refusing to look away when she needed help most. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and promoted Silas to head of internal security, a position that came with a significant salary increase and an office on the executive floor. Finn was absolutely in awe of his father, telling everyone at school that his dad was a real hero who saved people. Silas did not feel like a hero. He felt tired and grateful it was over, but he accepted the promotion and the recognition with quiet grace. A week after the kidnapping, Serafina invited Silas and Finn to dinner at a restaurant that overlooked the Chicago River. It was the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine lists the size of encyclopedias. The kind of place Silas had never been able to afford. But Finn was thrilled by the menu that let him order anything he wanted. And Serafina spent the evening listening to a 7-year-old explain the intricacies of second-grade politics with genuine interest. Over dessert, chocolate cake for Finn, coffee for the adults, Serafina looked at Silas and said, "I owe you more than I can ever repay. You don't owe me anything. I owe you my life. Then, pay it forward. Help someone else when they need it." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes and softened the sharp edges of her face. "I can do that." In the weeks that followed, Serafina Harrington slowly came back to life. The shadows under her eyes faded. The tension in her shoulders eased. She started leaving the office at reasonable hours, started attending company events without constantly checking exits, started trusting that she could walk through a parking garage without someone waiting in the darkness. The healing was not instant or complete, but it was happening, and that was enough. Silas learned to open up in ways he had not allowed himself since his wife died. He found himself calling Serafina for advice on security protocols and staying on the phone to talk about Finn's latest school project. He found himself smiling more, laughing at jokes, feeling something other than the constant, low-grade exhaustion that had defined his life for the past 3 years. And Finn, in the way that children understand things adults miss, took one look at the way his father looked at Serafina and the way she looked back, and decided that maybe his family was going to grow after all. On a cool evening in late autumn, 6 months after the kidnapping, Serafina showed up at Silas's modest apartment with Thai food and a bottle of wine. Finn was delighted to have her there, showing off his room and his collection of action figures and the drawing he had made of his dad fighting bad guys. After dinner, Finn fell asleep on the couch between them, and Silas carried him to bed while Serafina cleaned up the takeout containers. When Silas came back to the living room, Serafina was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Without turning around, she said, "I never thanked you properly for seeing the truth when I was trying so hard to hide it. You thanked me dozens of times, not for that specifically." She turned to face him, and in the warm light of his small apartment, with the sounds of the city muted through the walls, she looked younger and softer and entirely different from the ice-cold CEO he had first met in that marble lobby. "You saw through my act when everyone else just assumed I was drunk. You noticed I was scared when I was trying to look strong. You cared when you had every reason not to." Silas crossed the room until he was standing in front of her. "I saw someone who needed help. That's all. That's everything." They smiled at each other, two people who had found something unexpected in the darkest moment. Two people who had learned that trust could be rebuilt and hearts could heal and families came in all kinds of shapes. The beginning of something new was waiting for them just ahead. Something warm and bright and worth the struggle it took to get there. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. But inside that small apartment, there was finally peace.